And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, September 9th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comment recognized, go to the dollar sign icon in the chat. This will create a super chat for you that I will acknowledge during the live broadcast of anything that you want to say on the show. Obviously it has to be appropriate, but like I said, I'll highlight it during the live broadcast, and it just makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution that you can make means the world to us. Also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link, which is on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment, GSMCPodcast.net. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. I hope everybody enjoyed this past week of both college football and the NFL being back. So it's going to be basically all NFL. And throughout the week, I will cover the other games. We're not going to get to every single game today, but as we move throughout the week, we'll get to them. So we're going to start off the show. We'll talk about the news that broke yesterday about Dak Prescott getting his new deal. So he's locked in with the Cowboys. I know I said I thought he was going to be the odd man out, but that's not the case. He gets his new deal, and we're also going to talk about the Cowboys and their victory over the Browns, 33-17. And this won't be the only time we talk about the Browns this week. I'm telling you that right now. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Jordan Love's injury on Friday. We'll get into talking about the Brazil game as well, what the timetable is for Jordan Love, the Packers starting quarterback. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about last night's Sunday night game between the Detroit Lions and the LA Rams. The Lions once again defeating the Rams in overtime 26-20. Then we'll talk about the rookie quarterbacks and how they did over the weekend in their debuts as well. And then in the final part of the show, we will preview tonight's game between the Jets and the 49ers as Aaron Rodgers makes his return. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Dallas Cowboys. And like I said, news broke yesterday. Dak Prescott gets his new contract, a 4-year, $240 million extension, $231 million guaranteed, and he becomes the first player to earn $60 million per year. So Dak ends up getting his money. And again, I'm going to admit, I was wrong. And that just goes to show you how the negotiation process goes and just how you just don't know anything. Because, from interviews and just the way things were going, it just didn't seem like the Cowboys were going to get a deal done with Dak at the start of the season. We were going to have to wait till after this season played out. But that was not the case. They get the deal done with CeeDee Lamb. Now they get the deal done with Dak. So those guys are locked in long term. Well, another 4-year deal, but still. So now, when the time comes, they will work on getting a deal done with Micah Parsons. But this is big for the Cowboys, however you look at it, because if they were to let go of Dak and let him walk, I mean, there would be teams lining up to sign him. And let me tell you, there were teams yesterday, and even the team that the Cowboys played against, they could have used Dak yesterday. And the game that I was at yesterday, I'll admit, the team I was watching for 60 minutes yesterday, they could have used Dak. But, yeah, it was big for the Cowboys to get this done because, I mean, what was their plan going to be if Dak were to leave? Because you have Trey Lance on the roster, but, he hasn't really played since the 49ers drafted him when they did, and then the Cowboys got him in a trade. But in the preseason, that 5-interception game that he had, it's not good. And, he would have been the alternative as well as, Cooper Rush. I mean, Cooper Rush is a solid backup, and he's won games for the Cowboys. But, those aren't your long-term answers there. Dak Prescott is. And that's why they got this deal done. Now, I know when it comes to Dak, he is who he is. He's a solid quarterback, puts up good numbers. But in the postseason, that's, where he struggles. But, Dak Prescott gives the Cowboys the best chance to win. And then if you let him go, it's like, well, where do you go from here? And I know I gave you the options, well, some of the options, but, what would they have? What are they going to go and draft a quarterback? But they wouldn't have a high enough pick to do so. Because the Cowboys right now, they have a roster. I know it's got issues, but they have a roster right now that can compete. So, if you let Dak go, the quarterback is the most important position. So, like I said, this is big for the Cowboys. I was wrong. I was thinking, yeah, maybe Dak's on his way out. But that's not the case. He's sticking around. And the Cowboys did play yesterday. And I'll be honest, look, I didn't really get to watch a lot of football yesterday. Well, I did get to watch a lot of football, but at the game I was at. So I got to go back and look at some of the highlights and, game film, things like that. But, I was keeping up with the scores and, did catch, most of the second half of the game against the Browns. But the Cowboys dominated this game. And Dak Prescott didn't put up huge numbers in this game because, you know what, he didn't have to. He didn't have to. And what's funny is the Browns, they were winning at one point. They were up 3-0, but then after that, the Cowboys never looked back. This was all Cowboys. They had a day, especially their defense, against Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. But yeah, these are Dak's numbers again. Not spectacular, but you know what? He didn't have to be spectacular. Because, like I said, the Cowboys dominated this game. And the one touchdown was to Brandon Cooks. And also Ezekiel Elliott had a touchdown yesterday as well. So, he's back in Dallas wearing the number 15 this time. It was a solid win. Trayvon Diggs had an interception. So already he's making an impact. His first game back after missing all of last year with the torn ACL. Kavonte Turpin had a punt return in this game. CeeDee Lamb, of course, was the leading receiver, 5 receptions for 61 yards. Also had a few carries in this game as well. Cowboys defense had 6 sacks in this game. Eric Hendricks had an interception and 2 sacks, so he made an impact his first game as a Cowboy. DeMarcus Lawrence had 2 sacks in this game. Michael Parsons had a sack. And also their stud kicker, Brandon Aubrey. 4 for 4 on field goals. He made a 57-yarder. He was 3 for 3 on extra points. He's a real weapon for them. He's one of the best kickers in the NFL. And he showed that yesterday once again. But yeah, all around, solid victory for the Cowboys. They only ran the ball. They ran the ball for over 100 yards, 102 yards. Zeke had 40 yards on the ground. Rico Dowdle had 26. Dalvin Cook was not active for this game, but you figure he's going to be involved in the rotation at some point. But it was a good victory for the Cowboys. Can't really complain about that. They'll be playing the Saints next week, who absolutely destroyed the Panthers yesterday. We won't get to them, but we'll, like I said, we're going to go throughout the week, and I'll try to get to every single game. Give each game, some love, of course. But, yeah, overall, solid victory for the Cowboys. But for the Browns, that was as ugly as it could get. Especially for their quarterback, Deshaun Watson. He did not play well in this game. His stats on the day from yesterday, he went 24 of 45 for 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Also ran the ball for 39 yards. David Njoku was their leading receiver. He had 4 receptions for 44 yards. I think he left this game with an injury. They could have scored another touchdown in this game. Amari Cooper, had it in his hands, but he dropped it. Not that it really would have mattered. But, yeah, that was bad. That was bad. Deshaun Watson was not good. And that is going to be an issue for the Browns. Because, you went up against a good Cowboys team. I'd probably put them, close to this, around the same group of teams. Because the Browns have a very good roster. And they made the playoffs last year. They got a good head coach. They got a good defense. I like their skill position players. Their offensive line is solid. Although they were missing, Jarek Wills didn't play in this game yesterday. One of their offensive linemen. But the quarterback is going to be the problem. And I said that throughout the year, you're going to see an inconsistent Deshaun Watson. Like, I do think Deshaun Watson at times is going to have his moments. But then you're going to have games like this. And if the Browns are going to want to go very far this year, Deshaun Watson has to play better. And he just did not play well. And it's not like it was against a bad team. Now, if it's against a bad team, that's, even worse. Cowboys are going to be good. And Deshaun Watson did not play well. And also, I just want to say, you see how that quarterback in Tampa's playing. Although you could say, well, he was playing against a bad Commanders defense. Maybe the Browns are having those internal conversations like, maybe we should have held on to that guy. Maybe we should have held on to him. But that's a conversation for a different day, which we will have that conversation in the coming days this week. But overall, good performance for the Cowboys. Look, I know it's one game, but people had their concerns. Look, if they stay healthy, this team's going to win their fair share of games, and they'll be in the playoffs. So that's my thoughts on this game. Let me know what you guys think. What were some of your takeaways from it? So with that, we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we will discuss Jordan Love's injury as well as the Brazil game on Friday. I'll give you my thoughts on that when we return. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.